and welcome to HCB, where today we are back with predictions after a little break off. It is week 18, and I should point out before we start, there is only going to be 9 games predicted this week. This is due to West Ham Liverpool not taking place through Liverpool being in the Club World Cup. So, only 9 games and no mention of West Ham. Man, this video is going to be probably 2 seconds. It won't be. It's already at least 10 seconds, so that's wrong. Anyway, let's move on to the early kickoff for this week. It is the Mikel Arteta derby as Everton take on Arsenal. And yes, I do know how topical that derby name is, based on the fact that potentially after this game, Mikel Arteta might be the manager of Arsenal. Now, of course, both sides are coming off iffy form recently with bright spots. Everton last time out drawing away against Manchester United. Meanwhile, Arsenal losing to Manchester City. So both sides coming from Manchester games and combining to form the Manchester... I've already given the derby name. I'm not going to try and think of another one. With regards to the history between the two clubs, Arsenal, out of their last 10 meetings, have won 7 of them. But Everton won the last meeting between these two sides. 1-0 win in April against Arsenal, and I should point out both of Everton's wins. They've won 2 of the last 10 meetings against Arsenal. Both of them, though, have come at home. And one thing that is damning about Arsenal this season is their away form. Only 2 wins all season. Meanwhile, Everton's bright spot has been their home form. 4 wins out of 8 in there. Now, I should point out when it comes to this game, that it's very hard to choose because both sides are on very iffy form. If I was to pick a winner, which I sort of have to because I'm doing predictions, I would say that Everton are going to beat Arsenal, and I'll tell you why. Because Arsenal are still not good, especially away from home, and Everton are on a bit of momentum after the results against Chelsea, against Man United, and even the cup game against Leicester will give them confidence because despite losing on penalties, they came back from 2-0 down to take it to penalties. So that will give them a lot of confidence, and which is something Arsenal do not have at the moment. So I'm going to say it will be 2-1 to Everton. We now move on to the Matt Target derby, one you're all waiting for, I can tell. As Aston Villa take on Southampton in a relegation battle, it's 17th being host to 18th. Both sides coming off 2 wins back-to-back. Villa's one coming away against Sheffield United. Meanwhile, Southampton's coming at home against West Ham, and that is very embarrassing, I tell you. Losing to West Ham. Yes, I am powering. Damn it, I said no mention of West Ham. I've broken that. The history between the two clubs. They last met in 2016, the dreaded season no Villa fan wants to remember, where Southampton beat them 4-2 at Villa Park. And I should point out of the last 8 results, Villa have only won 1 of them, that being in December 2013. So they haven't won against Southampton in 6 years. But then again, they haven't really played them much. And this is a very different Southampton side to the side Villa last played. Southampton, both sides really desperately needing a win. Potentially Ralph Hasenhüttl's job is on the line here. One thing Villa do have going for them, similar to Everton in the previous game, their home form is decent. They have won 3 of their 8 games for a relegation candidate side. That isn't too bad. Meanwhile, Southampton, home or away, doesn't really matter. Their form, it ain't great. Only 2 wins of their last 8, and I know there's only one difference, but Villa have been also picking up results at home. In the meantime, a couple draws as well. They've only lost 3 of the 8 home games. Meanwhile, Southampton, when they haven't won, they haven't lost. They haven't really drawn either. So that's where the difference comes. Overall, I reckon, despite the league position, I believe Villa's in a much better position than Southampton, despite only being 1 different. So I believe this will be quite comfortable and potentially Ralph Hasenhüttl's last game in charge of Southampton. I'm going to say this will be 2-0 to Aston Villa. We now move on to the Eddie Howe derby. Bournemouth fans will not want to admit this is the Eddie Howe derby. Bournemouth take on Burnley at 3 o'clock. I was so tempted to go for the mid-table teams beginning with B derby, but unfortunately Brighton are also mid-table. So yeah, I mean 12th versus 14th. I'm not sure how many people are too interested in this game, but it's a game nonetheless, and I must predict it. Both sides coming off wins after long spells of losing. Burnley's coming against Newcastle at home. Meanwhile, Bournemouth's coming against Chelsea away. Both good wins in their own regards. The history between the two clubs, ironically, in the 6 games, has had no draws. You would have thought a mid-table match like this would have at least had one draw, but no. Bournemouth winning 2 of the last 6, Burnley winning the other 4. And one thing I will say could probably concern Burnley is their away form. However, despite the record suggesting that they might win this, they've done very good at home this year. Away from home, they've only won 1 game, that being against Watford. Meanwhile, Bournemouth's issue has been their home form. With them winning only 2 of the 8 games this season, being against Manchester United and Everton. Overall, despite it not ever finishing in a draw before, I believe these sides, they're too close in the hierarchy and in their form to call a potential winner. And while neither has actually drawn in any of their last 7, I believe that run will come to an end, and this will be a score draw, 1-1. We now move on to the Oliver Norwood derby as Brighton and Hove Albion play Sheffield United. I know, I doubt many of you know he plays for Brighton. He did all right there. Both sides coming off another game where they didn't lose. Brighton coming off a 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace on Monday. Meanwhile, Sheffield United coming off 2-0 win against Aston Villa at home. Now, obviously, the main thing, Sheffield United are away, and when they are away, what happens is they don't lose. Despite again only winning 2 of the 8 away games, they are unbeaten away from home, drawing a lot of them by a particular scoreline of 1-1. Meanwhile, Brighton, their home form has been decent for them. They've won 3 of their 8 home games this year, only losing 2 of them, which is not a bad home record. Overall, if you look at this game, it's 2 sides that like to play very nice football. Sheffield United playing expressive, simplistic but brilliant football, brilliantly simplistic. Meanwhile, Brighton, if you look at the stats under Graham Potter, have vastly improved their possession stats and all that. However, you've got to say that Sheffield United, being the away side, would probably thrive on having slightly less possession. So overall, I'm going to say that this is going to be another game where Sheffield United remain unbeaten, but it's another game where away from home, they're going to draw. It's going to be 2-2 at the Amex. We now move on to the Alan Pardew derby, or to give it its full name, 2 teams that want to forget they had Alan Pardew as their manager derby, as Newcastle take on Crystal Palace. Newcastle coming off a loss against Burnley last week. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace coming off a draw against Brighton in the M15 derby? M15 derby, I believe, is what it is called. These sides, when you think of goals, what 2 teams spring to mind? Sorry, what 18 teams spring to mind? And then you look at the other 2, and it's Newcastle and Crystal Palace. Sorry, I'm being harsh. Watford, you probably don't think of goals either. My bad. This probably won't be the best game when it comes to quality. However, it will be a tough game. Both Steve Bruce and Moore Hudson have got Newcastle and Crystal Palace playing scrappy football. Which is, if it works, it works, and that it works for both Newcastle and Crystal Palace at this moment. Overall, I believe that this will be a tight game. However, I believe that on the form Newcastle are on, and despite being unbeaten in 4, the slight drop off from Palace and how they performed, especially in the Brighton game, I believe that this game will be close and a 1-0 win for Newcastle. It's either going to be John Joe Shelby or a defender with the goal. Just saying. I'm telling you now, it's going to be no one else. John Joe Shelby or a defender with the goal. We now move on to the Matt Jarvis derby, and I'm not sure whether I've used that name before. Don't think I have. It is Norwich versus Wolves. I should have just called it the Yellow Derby. That would have been because that'd be a bit boring. But both sides coming off another game without a win. This Wolves coming off a loss at home to Spurs. Meanwhile, Norwich coming off a draw against Leicester, which is a decent result for them. But it means they are now 4 games without a win. Norwich, to be fair, their blessing out of the season at the moment has been their slightly decent home form. Obviously, they beat City at Carrow Road. Meanwhile, Wolves overall have not been at their best away from home. considering they are 8th. However, they have only lost one away game all season. They've just drawn a lot of them as well. Overall, when it comes to this game, I believe that Wolves are in a much better position to win this than Norwich. If I were Norwich, I'd be concerned about this game. Despite the performance against Leicester, which was a good performance, I believe that Wolves will blow out Norwich. And they comfortable winners just through Wolves' their attackers. They're very good on form at the moment. Raul Jimenez, Adama Traore, and Jota all tripping in with goals, and that is key to to perform. While Norwich have got Timu Pukki at the moment, I don't think it is enough. So I'm going to say Wolves. They're going to win 3-0. We now move on to one of the big games of this weekend. It is Manchester City versus Leicester, second versus third, late kickoff on Sky Sports. I'm not plugging it. I'm just telling you where you can watch it. Just telling you on Talk Sport. Probably have it on radio. Where else could you see? Where could you watch it legally? I don't know. Yeah, but this is obviously the Riyad Mahrez derby. The Riyad Mahrez derby. Whether Riyad Mahrez will be playing in it, we do not know. That is how wild Pep's rotation is. Both teams, Man City coming off a win against Arsenal at the Emirates on Sunday. Meanwhile, Leicester coming off a slight setback with a loss against Norwich. When it comes to results, obviously Leicester, despite their big form, have stumbled a little bit away from home when it comes to these big matches, losing to Manchester United and Liverpool this season away from home, and haven't actually. Meanwhile, Man City have potentially stumbled at home this season, coming off losses against Wolves and Man United. Their most recent home game was the Man United game where they lost 2-1. But when it comes to this game, I worry for Leicester, and I tell you why. On paper, Leicester are the better team at the moment when it comes to the form and the league position and just the overall mentality of the club. However, what I will say is, when it comes to these big games, as I've mentioned, they've only had two. They've only had 2 games against the top 6. 3 games against the top 6 away from home. Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool. Out of that, they've only got 1 point when it comes to these. So that concerns me, their ability to actually play these sides. What I will say to this is they've looked good in all these games, and if they did beat Man City, it would be a massive statement of intent for them to push on and stay above City for the rest of the season. I'm not convinced that will happen. The Man City side, they usually do show up in these big games. Man United game aside, they do show up against. They showed up against Chelsea, showed up against Arsenal. I know it's a big game of caliber. Okay, the meaning behind it, and when it comes, and I just think City's experience in this high level of performance will do well. But remember 2016. Remember Leicester. Pretty much cementing they were going to win the league by beating Man City 3-1. That could easily happen again. I'm not saying they'll win the league, but I'm just saying that could happen again. I've mumbled on for a bit. Sum up, I don't think that will happen. I believe Man City will win this game. It will be a very entertaining one. 3-2. We now move on to the Sunday games, where it is the Tom Cleverley derby up first, as Watford take on Manchester United at 4 o'clock. Watford, guess what? Coming off a loss against Liverpool. Meanwhile, Man United coming off against a draw against Everton, where they were slightly lucky to even get a draw. It's a very interesting game. The last time these two sides met, Man United won 2-1. It was March 2019. Out of the last 8 games, there hasn't been any draws. Man United have won 7 of them. Watford's only win coming in 2016. A concerning stat for Watford. It's very hard to pick this because Watford overall have actually been decent under Nigel Pearson. One thing that does stand out, though, they still haven't won a home game all season, which is very, very concerning. Only picking up 4 points at home, which is not good considering they've played 8 games. Meanwhile, Man United are on a bit of decent form, unbeaten in their last 5. However, their away form isn't great, only winning 2 games, but they away from home. But one of them was against Man City, so the other was against Norwich. So maybe it balances out. Anyway, so overall, despite I I feel it's hard for this one because Nigel Pearson has shown he has done a decent job with Norwich, Watford so far, despite not getting a win so far. I believe they have improved under him. Whether that's just the new manager feel coming in, obviously, look, they did lose to Liverpool, but at the end of the day, it was Liverpool. They could have put anyone in. I don't think they would have won. Uh, However, I do believe this will come off another loss, but it will be another learning experience for Watford to potentially push on after the performance they hopefully put in. So I'm going to say Man United, but Man United just 2-1 to the Red Devils. We now move on to the Jose Mourinho derby, where Spurs play Chelsea. And yes, I am aware this is technically the third Jose Mourinho derby of the season, but I didn't do predictions week 1, and I didn't do them the last week. So this is the first Jose Mourinho derby in my books. Spurs coming off their second consecutive win, beating Wolves with a last gasp winner away from home. Meanwhile, Chelsea coming off their second consecutive loss, losing to Bournemouth at home. Potentially concerning stat for Frank Lampard. And when it comes to the history between these two clubs, obviously it's a massive history, and it is pretty much even. At the last 10 results, Spurs have won 4. Chelsea have won 4. There's been 2 draws, and also the way they've won them has been the same. Both teams have won 3 of their games at home, 1 away. The most recent result being a 2-0 win for Chelsea at February, where Kieran Trippier scored that hilarious / terrible own goal, depending on which team you support. As a West Ham fan, it was hilarious. So you look at this game, and you look at what it means to both sets of fans. It is an important game, despite not being the direct derby for both teams. It's a very important game. They've been like neck and neck in the league, both these sides, for many years. I believe what's going to happen is Chelsea's form, it's concerning. Now, I am aware they seem to only beat teams on bad form. Spurs are not a team on bad form. However, you've got to look, Spurs are at home. They've got Jose Mourinho in charge. They have improved under him, definitely. And Jose Mourinho, more than the Man United game, especially now they lost that Man United game, would desperately want to win this one against Chelsea. Now, I am aware the first time he rocked up against Chelsea with his previous club, Man United, they lost 4-0. This is different. He's now at home. He's got the advantage. Chelsea are on bad form. I believe that Spurs will win this game, and in the end of the day, they will win comfortably. I think this will be 3-1 to Tottenham Hotspur. I apologise, Tottenham Hotspur fans, if you think I've jinxed you. If I have, well then, it's sort of win-win as a West Ham fan for me, really. If you win, then well done. I get my prediction right. If you lose, what do you do? We now move on to my fantasy team, and I should point out, since the last time I spoke to you, I have remained top of the league. I unfortunately for me, this week is probably going to be a throwaway week just because of the Liverpool players not being in. Now, I am aware that I can take them out. However, I stick on a one transfer basis, meaning the Liverpool players will stay in. For this, will stay in my team. And also, it seems a bit pointless just taking them both out and put them back in again. Just for me personally. So we've got Schmeichel in goal, Sonnehew, Lundstrom, Dunk in defence. Then Donker, Kante, De Bruyne and Grealish is a new signing. I swapped out Dwight McNeil and put in Jack Grealish. Abraham Vardy is captain on Aubameyang's vice captain up top. As I said, it's partly also a throwaway week. I should point out O'Connell's pretty much the only sub, just because Robertson and Mane are on the bench. It's pretty much a throwaway week just because the amount of clashes between the sides. Between the players I've got in there, which is annoying, but I should remain top of the table and move on to next week. That's going to conclude this week's video, and we might have a record for shortest one, shortest prediction video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. Forgot to tell you that in the past. You got to turn on that. No, you got to turn on that notification bell, and I will see you on Monday for the review video.